Dennis, thank you very much indeed. It's great to be here. Very exciting. The conversation now is really focusing on how to increase visibility. And my goal in this session is to get you enthusiastic about using techniques and tips to improve your visibility. Now I'll just switch on my screen so that you can see my screen rather than the one that's there. There we go. So should be able to see my screen now. And one of the reasons for having this conversation about increasing visibility is because of the challenges that have been thrown up by the lockdown, by the working from home requirement, and it really does impact visibility quite significantly. You can't have those incidental conversations in the corridor with a colleague, or, present an idea, a new project to a line manager over coffee. All of that kind of activity is diminished in the current working from home scenario. But I think that the bigger problem presented by working from home is actually about rapport. And really what I was saying was this whole issue raised by working from home is, for me, the biggest problem is building rapport, is having rapport with colleagues and clients. It's very challenging in that two-dimensional space that is the online meeting, where you can see people, you can hear them, but that rapport is very much reduced. So the conversation I want to have with us today is all about how we can address that, how we can have better rapport while we have online meetings or on the phone. And I just want to outline what we're going to be doing in our little session here. So hopefully, can you see? Hopefully you can see that screen. So two things. We're going to be looking at emotional rapport. And emotional rapport is all about trust. It's about building connection. It's the space where we have influence. We can motivate and inspire people. And the other thing that we're going to touch on today is what I call cognitive rapport. And cognitive rapport is about having people understand the information that we're sharing and saying in an easy way, in a way that the messages are clear and compelling. So for the emotional rapport, we're going to look at something called a presence audit. Sweet and simple. It's a very short audit, but it's also very powerful. And the other thing we'll look at is objectives. Well, we always look at objectives, but these are emotional objectives and how we can use them in our online meetings. In the cognitive space, we're going to look at how to make our messages more clear and compelling. And the tool we're going to look at there is a model I've created called the presentation pyramid. So that is our session in a nutshell. So let's kick off first then with this thing called the presence audit. The presence audit is all about having a presence, your ideal presence, show up consistently in every meeting, every phone call, and every email as well. And to help me explain the concept of the presence audit, I'm tapping into a woman that I'm sure everybody will recognize, and that's Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama's in the news right now because her documentary about her book Becoming has just been released on Netflix. And Michelle Obama is somebody that's had to work very hard on developing her presence and using tools to create rapport. Now, I've never met Michelle Obama, but I have read a book and got some sense of her from that. And the presence audit that I would give her if she ever asked me, is these three words here, these three descriptive words: authentic, capable, and vulnerable. Authentic, certainly when you read her book, you get a sense of somebody that's just very real, and very connected to the moment. She's also very highly capable, an attorney, a very accomplished first lady, and a highly successful author. And there's something interesting when you read her story. There's a kind of vulnerability about her presence. She had to really work hard in some of those public spaces that she found herself. And I think in that vulnerability, there was also her power, because it helped her to be really somebody people could connect to. So that's what we're looking at when we're talking about creating a presence audit. We're looking at 3 words that capture your presence at its best. And the process that we do that is very simple. I ask you to think about your last meeting. When was your last meeting? It might have been earlier today. It might have been last week, more probably. In your last meeting, what was your presence like? And what would other people say your presence was like? So just be thinking about that for the moment. That's sort of part 1 of the process. And really what I'm going to do now is just outline the process, and then give you an opportunity at a later point to complete it and really come up with the words that are resonant for you. So let's move into the future. And in the future, you are your ideal self. Your presence is fabulous. What words would really describe you and describe your presence when you are at its best? And what would other people say? What do you want other people to describe your presence like? So it's really looking at the past, looking to the future, and from that coming up with your own 3 words. Now, while I get you to think about the words that would be relevant and resonant for you, I'd like to share my own presence audit, which I use all the time. I'm using it right now on this call. And it involves a member of the royal family, none other than Prince Harry, who obviously doesn't live here anymore, but he did. And when he did, I managed to meet him at a conference on mental health. And at this conference, I introduced a number of speakers. And after the event, I got a lovely email from the organizer. And she said, "Oh, thank you, Jacqui, for what you did. We're really pleased with what you did." And then she described my presence. And she said, "We really liked your presence." And she used these 3 words to describe my presence. And you know what it's like when when words just bounce off a page and they just resonate with you. And I thought, you know what, that's kind of how I want to show up, whether it's online, whether it's in a meeting, whether it's in a conference, in a summit. Those 3 words follow me everywhere. And the trick with the presence audit to really make it be a useful tool for you is to embody the presence audit. And so it'll be in the channels that people experience us, particularly how what they hear us saying and what they see. So, for example, in here, the sound of your voice is a wonderful way to embody the qualities of your presence audit. And the voice is really, in my view, a very underused business tool. The voice can transform your presence and can transform how people engage and feel about you. And there's a lot of research about the impact of voice on people's perceptions. And there's some very interesting work that's come out of the University of Edinburgh, which discusses how after people have heard one word, so the word they used in that test was hello, after they've heard the word hello, they've decided whether they trust you and whether they like you. So, and interesting, the research that they did also followed on. What was it like, the perceptions of that voice when people had heard the person speaking for 10 minutes or 15 minutes? I can't remember which one it was. And 8 out of 10 people had the same perception, the same view of the personality of that person, of their presence, compared to when they'd heard one word to having heard them speak for some time. So voice is really a significant part of your presence. And I don't know how much you think about your voice online, but certainly from where I come from, formerly in the BBC, the voice was critical, and you would never go on air without having first had voice training, which would look at how to breathe using your diaphragm, things like articulation and pause. So embodying your presence audit, once you've kind of got those three words, vocally is a really good place to focus. And then, of course, the language, the words, the kind of speaking style that we have also is part of our presence. So we might want to look at that, places where we might want to amend, be clearer, be more unique sounding in some ways. I'll go on to that in a minute when we go on to the cognitive rapport. And also online, particularly online meetings that are in vision, it's you are your most important visual online, and particularly your face. Usually it's a medium close-up, head and shoulders shot. So, expressions on your face capture your presence very, very powerfully. So make sure you're aware of how you are coming across. And also in television, it would be called a set, but in our homes, it's not really a set. It's the room where we're actually communicating, and making sure that that's also congruent with our presence audit as well. So moving on to the second part of this whole concept of emotional rapport, I want to introduce you to a new habit, I hope it will be. And it's going into meetings with clear emotional objectives. So, when you're writing an email, thinking consciously about what you want the person you're writing to feel. And also when you're online. And I'm thinking, if we think of a conversation or a presentation as having this kind of shape, that being the beginning, that's the middle, and that's the end, you might want to have what I would call a universal emotional objective, or you might want to have emotional objectives that correspond to different parts of a conversation or a presentation. So at the beginning, you might want to get people excited. In the middle, you might want to reassure people about the points or convince them, persuade them. And at the end, maybe you want them to be, ready for action and ready to take up your ideas. So, and excited about taking up your ideas. So you can use emotional objectives in a number of ways. And I want to do kind of a live, I don't know if I'll be able to do it now. I was going to have a look at the chat, the screen. So to do that, I might have to stop sharing. So what I'm going to do is show you a list of emotions. They're not exhaustive, but it's a table of emotions. And what I want you to think about and put in the chat are any of the emotions listed on that table, the emotions that I want you to feel in this session that we're doing right now. So I'll just move on to, that's the table. And I'm just curious, which of those feelings do you think I want you to feel as we go through this session? Now, I can only have a look at the chat box if I exit out of my screen. So I'll pick up on what you're inputting once we've done the slide deck, so we can do it without too much disruption. But I can tell you, if you're curious, I can tell you which ones were in my mind, how I wanted you to feel. I want you to feel interested in this whole concept of developing presence and developing rapport. I also want you to feel enthusiastic about using some new techniques and ideas in your conversations and your online meetings. And the key thing is once you determine what your objective is or objectives are, it's about delivering them. And it goes through to that chart we saw before. What are people hearing? The tone of your voice, the energy in your voice, the clarity in your voice all deliver emotional objectives. And the kind of language, the stories that you use, how you illustrate information, how you bring people's attention to things, all of those things will help you achieve your emotional objectives. So moving on, I'd like to just leave you with this thought when it comes to thinking about emotions. You can't leave out the logic, but emotions are incredibly powerful. And I really make the difference in your online communication. In the last few minutes before we go into Q&A, I just want to take you to cognitive rapport. And cognitive rapport is how we communicate so that it's clear, it's compelling to the people that we are addressing, whether it's clients or colleagues. And I have what I call a simple model. It's called the presentation pyramid, and you can see it there. And if we think about the pyramid, we think about the top of the pyramid there, and then the middle of the pyramid there. So if we're thinking about communicating, whether it's a presentation or a contribution in a meeting, always be pretty clear. What is my big point? What am I really saying? And then here would be your supporting points, your key points that explain the big point. So all of this really is about what you're saying, making that clear. The compelling part comes down at the base of the triangle. And there's a little acronym that I've created called BRIBE. And BRIBE is really about how to make messages compelling. And it's the acronym short for begin powerfully, reinforce ideas, involve your audience, be bold, and end powerfully. So really, once you've got your ideas razor sharp, what you're actually saying, how you're explaining it, then it's looking at, how you start it, how you end it, how you reinforce, how you connect to people. And being bold is about just making sure that every now and then you step outside the very obvious, the very safe, to achieve the impact that you want. Now, I think we are at the top of the hour, so I think I do need to, before I go to the Q&A, just say that if you are interested in developing presence, your personal presence, most of the ideas represented here come from my book, Executive Presentations, and I'm very proud that the book was shortlisted last year for the National Business Book Awards. I've created a website that's got quite a lot of resources. So if you're looking at voice work, if you're looking at messaging, all of that kind of thing, and online and virtual meetings, on the website execpresentations.com, there's a resources tab, and there's quite a lot of stuff that you can just help yourself to continuing in this kind of development. And then finally, what I want to leave you with is a challenge. And the challenge is this: the presence audit. In the next 7 days, play around with the words, find your audit, the 3 words that work for you. Try out this concept of using emotional objectives going into meetings. See if there's any difference for you. See if there's any difference for your clients and your colleagues. Do they notice any change from being very specific about using and delivering emotional objectives? And then the presentation pyramid, a very simple tool, very effective at getting you to refine your ideas, but also make them compelling as well. And so as we go into Q&A, I would like to just leave you with a really great thought on the whole idea of visibility from a comedian, not the most obvious source, but she says this, Margaret Cho, who's an American comedian. She says the power of visibility can never be underestimated, and I think she's absolutely right.